Okay. Thank you, Roberta, for introducing me, and also Marissa for making this group possible. And thanks everybody for coming. I appreciate the invitation and to be here and have a chance to talk to everybody. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I'll try to use my projection voice today so everybody in the back can hear me. Also like to cite Brian Powell, who's our communications manager at the Flynn Foundation, who's here today as well. The Flynn Foundation, I don't know if everybody is familiar with the Flynn Foundation. We're one of the older private grant-making organizations in Arizona. Been around since 1965, traditionally a healthcare grant-making organization. Today we support the biosciences in Arizona with a major college scholarship program, the Flynn Scholars Program. We support arts and culture throughout Arizona. And we have a new program, relatively new program, the Arizona Center for Civic Leadership, to develop future statewide leaders. Now I joined the Flynn Foundation in 1989, so I've been at Flynn for quite a while. I'm on my 25th year right now, which really blows me away. When I joined on, I don't think anybody plans 25 years in advance, but it's been a great organization, great people doing great things, and I've grown a lot with the organization. The organization's grown quite a bit itself, and so here I am today. And as Roberta said, I was previously in politics, and also I got my start in journalism. So what I'm going to talk about today is, actually what I'm going to talk about today is not rocket science. And if it was rocket science, I wouldn't be in this field. But Roberta asked if I would talk about tips and strategies from the communications perspective. And basically what I'll be talking about today will be common sense and some pretty straightforward things, and some things might seem blatantly obvious, but a lot of communications is the small things that if you don't pay attention to, they can turn into big problems. And so that's what I'm going to be addressing today. And I also want to just encourage interaction. Any questions up along the way, feel free to raise your hand and chime in, just to keep this informal as possible. As informal as possible, I should say. Why do you need to know about communications if it's not your job? Everybody in the room, how many are communications professionals that would be interested in seeing? So we have a few hands up in the air, but the majority is non-communications professionals, which is what I thought it would be. And I just wanted to say that it might not think it's your job, but actually a good percentage of your day is probably spent on communications tasks. I think all day long you write emails, you lead meetings, you give speeches, you take phone calls, you meet with the public. These are all communications tasks, and it's true about every staff member. And so whether you realize it or not, you are a communicator. And because of this, if you are a communications officer like yourself, I tend to try to reach out to our whole staff, the non-communicators, to get them involved in communications efforts. Brian and I make up a staff of 2, but I feel like at Flynn about half of our staff at least is communications staff, because they're helping me out with communications projects all the time. Sometimes the best person for a reporter to talk to is a program officer who knows the content and not me. Sometimes the best ideas come from those who aren't ingrained in something day to day, like I am, from the communications perspective. And sometimes you just flat out need the help from others to get things done. If you're not a communications officer, seek one out, because it can really come in handy as far as when you're trying to put together a report for your board, or anything that you have to come up with to help identify the key messages and package a presentation for somebody. We'll also say that you, as a non-communications professional or a communications professional, represent your organization, and you help to create your organization's brand. No matter what your role is, no matter how big your organization is, you're helping to make an impression about how people perceive your organization from everything you do. And you just think about examples out there, like think about Starbucks. When you go to Starbucks, they're very kind and cordial, and you get chatty with them on the intercom system at the drive-thru. Very different from when you go to a motor vehicle department, as an example. You get the frontline person there can make all the difference in how an organization is perceived, and you are part of making that perception happen. And obviously here, lift on 3, this is why communication is a big important part of everybody's everyday working life. I threw this here just to see if it gets many chuckles. It probably gets some confused looks. I don't know if everybody knows Jimi Hendrix in this room. Probably some do. Probably some know that his first album was Are You Experienced? And probably others are saying, what? Why is he showing that? This is just to plant the seed for probably the most important takeaway from today. If there's one thing to remember that's important is in communications is that you need to know who your audience is, and you need to keep them in mind with basically everything that you do. And it sounds pretty basic, but it's ultra important. When I took Communications 101 in college, the first thing they teach you is the basic model that you have. There's your message, and then you need a recipient as well, which sounds so obvious, but the fact of the matter is a lot of people forget about the audience and focus only on what they want to say. And that can lead to some problems if you don't take your audience into account. And it happens not just when you're making a presentation, but it happens in everything that you do throughout the day. And just with the Jimi Hendrix example, I mean, gauging the age of an audience makes a big difference, obviously. You wouldn't talk to a classroom full of students the same way you would talk to a group of teachers. You would tailor your message accordingly. Sometimes your audience has a different knowledge level. If I'm talking about a highly complicated scientific issue, which I actually wouldn't do because I don't have that level of grasping scientific concepts, but if I were to, or if a scientist were to put it into simpler language so that the lay audience can understand it. Those are just obvious examples. So where it gets a little bit more difficult is when the recipient, the audience, when they have beliefs and attitudes that might change, that might have an impact on how they perceive what you're saying. And to try to gauge that ahead of time can make your message go over much more effectively. Just as a dumb example, if it's fine on a Monday to criticize with your buddies, how bad the Arizona Cardinals played the day before. But I don't think you would do that if you're to your next door neighbor if that person is a 300-pound linebacker for the Arizona Cardinals. So obviously your audience is making all the difference there. And that pertains to many more professional examples as well. And sounds simple again, but you just think about the number of times that professional broadcasters have gotten fired for saying something insensitive on the air, or that politicians have gotten criticized for saying something not really taking into account who they're talking to. So it does happen all the time, and the damage can be quite big. So in any situation like this, it really helps, whether you're talking to a grant seeker or a reporter or somebody on the phone, to try to put yourself in their shoes. Where are they coming from? What are they thinking? What do they want to hear from you? And then bridge to where they're at. Try to give your same message that you want to give, but say it to it or present it to them in their words, in their context, and the way that they might perceive it. And a good deal of what I spend my time on, it seems, is writing talking points, whether it's for preparing for an interview with a reporter, or whether it's to write talking points for our CEO to give a presentation. And that's a lot of the steps that I follow is just going through this whole process of trying to psych out the audience and meet them where they're at instead of where I'm at. I spend a good chunk of what I'm talking about here about email. Since email is something that's just taken over, and everybody spends a good portion of their day doing email. And it's just a stereotypical communications tool that is very helpful, but it can be very damaging at the same time. When the Flynn Foundation first took on email, it was about 1996 or something like that. It was just coming into being for institutions. And at the time, everybody said, well, what are we going to do with this? Why would you email somebody that you can just walk down the hall and visit? But it soon caught on when our scholarship coordinator realized that I can send an email to a student in Europe, and they can get it, and they can respond to me. I don't have to pick up the phone and call them at 2 o'clock in the morning anymore, which is the way that was done back in that day. So it quickly caught on, but at the same time, our setup was we had one phone line for the entire office. It was through AOL. For those who remember those days when you would dial up and get a busy signal and keep doing it for 45 minutes, and then you would get a connection. You would do your bit, and then we only had one line, and so everybody was always fighting over who would get to be on AOL. So those were the early days. So the point being that email can be your best friend, but it can also cause problems. And so I just wanted to give a few of these tips that Roberta was talking about being effective with your email as you do it throughout the day. One thing is to email consciously. And I mentioned this just because I saw an article recently in the paper about that there is actually now a condition for texting while you're asleep. I don't know if anybody saw that. It was in the news over the last week. It's just like sleepwalking, that some people actually wake up and start sending texts, and they don't recognize what they're doing. And then they'll find out about it later. So, and I don't think anybody is doing that with email necessarily, but it might be. But the point is that it's easy when you email so much, and I do. I mean, I'm emailing all the time, whether it's to internal, external. I mean, Brian, he's 10 feet away, and I'm emailing him stuff throughout the day. You go into autopilot mode, and it's easy just to go through the mechanics and not think and do some dumb things along the way that can get you in trouble. So I wanted to just give a few tips about that. Everybody knows about don't reply all. You know, if you don't want to send something back to all the other 50 that got the lunch invitation, not necessary. But one lesson I've learned the hard way is that when you are sending an email or formatting an email, and I like to type the name of the person into the to field, and then it auto-fills it in, and that's what our Outlook system does very effectively. Well, sometimes it grabs the wrong name, and so instead of sending to Brian Powell, I'm sending to somebody who's a Brian at a different organization. Sounds kind of funny, but it can be very embarrassing or damaging if you do it. So before you send anything, make darn sure who's in the to line, because sometimes, I've done that a few times, but I've also received quite a few emails for people emailing to another grad. And so I know that type of thing goes on a lot. And in fact, I take it to the point that I won't set up an email with anybody anymore in the to field or the CC field. Because it's easy to just hit reply and then start typing your message, and if it's an important email where you got to get the message right, and you hit the send button by accident, that can be embarrassing and maybe even damaging. And sometimes, I swear, I don't know how it happens, but sometimes Outlook just seems to send itself without any command. That's happened to me about a half a dozen times, and I haven't figured out why it does it. One time I was putting together a news release to send out, and putting together the recipient's email addresses, the reporter's email addresses. I was cutting and pasting them. I thought it was easy to just cut it and paste it right into the email. So I was putting names. I put all the names into the body of the email, and then I was pulling them into the to field just to ultimately arrive at the final distribution list. Well, in the middle of that process, Outlook did its thing and just sent it. And so there were about 15 reporters out there that got this list from me of different reporters with their names and their email addresses with no explanation about what the heck it was. So I learned a good lesson then. So just be wary of who's in those two fields and CC field before anything goes out. Also recognize what you're attaching. It's easy to attach a document and think that you're attaching the right document, but you grab the wrong version or even the wrong document. And it's actually very easy to send something sensitive to the wrong person or inappropriate. And that can, again, very obvious, basic, but if you're doing this, you can really cause a lot of problems. Another one is to email smartly. Use some think and use some common sense before you email, and caps lock, and once again, everybody knows about that. When you're using the BCC, or when you're emailing to a lot of people, it's best to use the BCC field. Not the to field. Nobody likes when their email address is sent out to 100 other people all of a sudden that they don't know. Just a good common courtesy. And listservs. I don't know if listservs aren't as popular as they used to be, it seems, but I've been involved with a few listservs. And it's evident that some of the listserv members don't quite understand how the listserv works, that if you do send something back, it goes to everybody, not just the person that apparently it came from. And so, there it is pointing to myself. So I've seen some pinballing going on where people think they're sending to one person and it's going to everybody, and that's not what you're looking for. So be careful about listservs. Subject lines as well seems so innocent and benign, but if you get an email and you're forwarding it on, maybe think about what that subject line is. It might have been appropriate when it comes to you, but if you send it to somebody else, it might lose its context, or even just start the whole message off on the wrong foot. And along the lines of subject lines, if you really, the person you're sending it to, you really want them to open it. If you're trying to get them to do something for you, as an example, think about making it a subject line that they'll want to open. You know, just like when you go to Yahoo and you see all these headlines that you just can't resist clicking on because you've got to see this video or the 10 top things of whatever. That really helps to make it effective. The chances that people will open your email. And finally, I would just say that just a reminder that email is not texting. It's sort of taken over as the standard form of communication as opposed to letters. And so it doesn't really reflect well if you make a lot of typos and you use LOL speak and such. Leave that for texting. It's really become the professional form of communication. And when you send something that's just quickly done, it does make an impression on the recipient of where it's coming from. I'll talk a bit about spam filters because this is something that has been eye-opening for me, just how much stuff gets caught up in the spam filter, and it can really cause some big problems. If you ever are expecting a message to come from somebody, a message back, and you don't get it, you almost take it personally. Like if you place a phone call to somebody, they don't bother to call you back. Same thing seems to happen with email. You send a message and nothing comes back, and you can get irritated by that. Actually, a lot of times I've found is what happens is maybe they did send it back and they got caught up in your company's spam filter. Or maybe they never got it because your message got caught up in their spam filter. That's happened quite a few times to me. I think we have a pretty good spam filter at Flynn, and it's fairly sensitive and it picks up a lot of stuff. And it seems to happen once a week that I'm expecting something and there it is in the spam filter. So how to avoid that? Because that can cause a lot of problems if you need a document and it's sitting in your spam filter and you never know about it. Just some basic tips. Don't send something to 50 or 100 people at once. You do have to send to groups, break it up into about 20 or less, and put those in the BCC field and send them off. If you send to 100, that's a tip-off that it might be spam mail coming and it will go to the spam filter. Don't include links when possible. That's another tip-off to the spam filter to take it in. If you're doing attachments, that increases your chances of something getting caught up. Whenever we do a news release, we don't attach the news release to an email. We just put the content right in the email itself because that increases the chances that it will get there. Doesn't look as pretty, but it's more effective in the long run. Don't send huge files of 8 megabytes or something like that. Or if you do, send a confirmation email just to let them know that they sent it and make sure that they got it. I don't think anybody in this room has done this, but don't cuss. I had somebody send me an email once and to make a point, they used the cuss word, and that email never made it. And the reason they went to the spam word was because of that cuss word. So just a curiosity there, I didn't know that would happen, and it did. So anyway, be mindful of the spam filter. Again, knowing your audience is very important here with emailing. Remember that when you're emailing to somebody, the world really is the recipient, or potentially could be, because people can forward that on, and it can get forwarded on from there. And that I hate when that happens, when you're sending an email to somebody, and they give you a response back, but they copy 6 other people that your message wasn't really geared towards, and suddenly the context is out of whack, and it may even be inappropriate, and now you've offended somebody. So just be aware that that happens. So when you're emailing somebody, just keep in mind that don't put something in there that you wouldn't want other people to see that it might get forwarded to. Which leads us to the telephone, which seems to have been forgotten. I hardly use the phone anymore, it seems. And then again, most of the calls that I receive on the telephone are sales calls, which I ignore anyway. So, but the question of when is it important to use the phone and not email? One thing that doesn't come across in email, obviously, is just the tonality, the mannerism, kind of inflection of your voice. If that's important with the message that you're sending, pick up the phone and don't try to email. If you're expecting something with a lot of give and take and back and forth, pick up the phone because that will take forever to trade emails back and forth until you get to the final point. And also, if you want to make an impression, if you want to get the full package across, pick up the phone. If you, if you're asking somebody out on a date, you don't typically send them an email. You want to make a phone call, and there's a reason behind that. Other than those instances, I tend to prefer email. It's just too darn efficient. Conference calls. Probably everybody participates in conference calls here and there. Be careful as well. Make sure you know who's on the line before you're talking. Sometimes people can drop in and the chime doesn't come on, and the next thing you know, you're talking about something and not knowing who's lurking in the background. That can cause some pretty big problems when it happens. Also, if you have a tendency to say, oh, so-and-so, stick around after everybody hangs up and I want to talk to you. Be careful about doing that as well, because you're never quite sure if there's somebody else listening in. And not that anybody would intentionally do that, but we actually had one meeting once with more than 50 people where that happened, people that were phoning into the meeting. And for some reason, they thought they were the only ones hearing, but we couldn't disconnect from the line for some reason. So they had a one-on-one personal conversation, and 50 people were listening in, and it was not the right kind of thing that you'd want 50 other people to hear about. So just be wary of always knowing that there could be people listening in on this. Finally, this is about the easiest thing you can imagine, but when you hang up the phone, make sure you hang it up. And I only say that because one time I hung up the phone and the cord got twisted and it didn't hang up, and it was with a reporter, and I was afterward kind of being smart alecky with my colleague. This was a long time ago in politics, about just making fun of the person who called, because we always did that. Anyway, so the reporter was listening in and called me right back and called me on it, and I didn't even know what I said because we did that all the time. It wasn't a big deal, but to that reporter it was a big deal. So in any communication, make sure you cease communication before you move the conversation on to the next level. I'll move along to writing. Just like everybody is a communicator, everybody is also a writer. Everybody has to write. Whether it's an email or a report or whatever. I know that everybody writes and pretty much every day, and it can really make an impression on, it can not only make you more effective in your job, but can make a major impression as well. You just think about if you get a job seeker cover letter and it has typos and spelling errors, you're going to rule that out right away. Or if you get like an email from Wells Fargo that has typos in it, that's probably a spam and not a legitimate email. So your writing can really make an impression on how people perceive you as a professional. And the basic, for those who don't like to write or don't feel that they're good writers, just the basic rules that I see, keep it brief, keep it clear, keep it concise. Don't dance around, just get right to the point. Don't use a lot of fancy adjectives. The clearer, the simpler, the better. The easiest way I find is just arrive at a one-sentence thesis statement. This is the main message I want to say. Think of 3 supporting points as bullets, and you pretty much got your outline right there. And then it can that gives you the structure that you can write the piece around, whatever it might be. Think like a journalist. Journalists think of when they're writing an article about who, what, when, where, how, and why. And if you think through those, you've pretty much covered all the basis of what you're putting together. And for those who get writer's block, which everybody of course does, I finally found something that seems to work for me after about 30 years of dealing with writer's block, and that is, for some reason, late at night when my brain is tired, if I just go to the computer and do a brain dump and just write without stopping whatever's coming to my mind, and not editing, not judging, not thinking, just pouring it out, no matter how terrible it might be. I find that the next day I go back to see how bad it is, and it's actually pretty good. And I'm surprised at how clear and coherent the thoughts get once you get into that. That's been a technique for overcoming writer's block, which everybody gets. So once you get that momentum going and the brain kicking in, it really seems to work. One more thing is to always proof your work, or better yet, have somebody else proof your work, so you don't end up in a situation like this. This type of thing happens a lot. A second set of eyes always helps. And I've talked a lot about the media today, and I know the communications people in the audience, I'm sure, deal with the media on occasion, but maybe others as well, because sometimes the call can come to you as the person who's in the know and who's talking with a reporter. Just a few tips on that, because they can come in very handy. Of course, anticipate what you're asked. Again, consider your audience, consider the reporter. why he's calling, why he or she is calling, what they're looking to, what information they're looking for, what perspective they might be coming from. I typically do a quick Q&A whenever there's a reporter interview, anticipating the top 5 questions they might ask and then coming up with the answers, working through it in my mind so that you can do that and be prepared instead of on the spot suddenly having to find the right words when your mind is racing. And in addition to answering questions, come prepared with 3 messages that you want to say. Don't just respond to every question that comes and then say goodbye, but come with 3 messages that you want to reinforce, that you feel are the important part of the story, and learn to bridge your answers back to those messages so that when the interview is done, that you've gotten your messages that come across and will hopefully come across in the story. And then finally, once again, with the audience, remember that you're not just speaking to the journalist. And it's easy to get chummy and start telling stories and stuff like that, which can come off pretty poorly if they end up in print because the context of the anecdote might get completely lost in doing so. Remember that you're talking to the world basically when you're talking to a journalist, to a reporter, and really there actually is no off the record. I mean, there is, and usually that's honored, but if something is juicy enough, there's always a boundary where it can become too valuable to be considered off the record. So I would suggest not going off the record or not trying to, because it can lead to problems. Just a couple more things and then we can get to some questions. Creating your internal brand. We wanted to talk a little bit about how you can create your own brand within your organization or within groups that you're involved with so that you can be more effective within your organization, for instance. How do you become an effective staff member, an effective team player? And how do you get, in other words, how do you get things done? To get things done, you're going to need help. And you can't do everything yourself. You need to rely on staff. And to do that, you've really got to build somewhat your own brand. You've got to build the trust and respect from your staff members or from your team members, whoever you're working with, so that when you're in a crunch and you need something, that they'll drop everything and help you, or that when you're leading a team, that you know that they'll be supporting you. This doesn't just happen overnight. It happens over time just by building their trust and their respect. One thing that's very important is breaking down the silos. And Flynn works very well in this regard. We've got 19 people, and we're constantly working as one big unit across the departments. And that helps out so well. And it wasn't always that way. We used to be much more siloed, and it seemed that nobody was quite willing to work outside of their silo, and getting things done was very disjointed. That was a long time ago, and it's working very smoothly. Like I said, you know, I feel like communications sometimes has 8, 9, 10 people on it because we do work in those size teams, and that's a very effective way to get things done. Try to get everybody on your team. Try to work with everybody, from the CEO to the IT manager, very important, the receptionist, etc., because they all play very valuable roles on your team, and at some point in time you're going to need their help in a very big way. So invite their participation, invite them into the decision-making processes. Everybody likes to be included, and if you're ignoring somebody or making assumptions that somebody may not want to be, who might have a reason to be there, that can only lead to mistrust and not good things. So you tend to be more inclusive rather than less. And don't forget that the small things matter, the birthday parties, the birthday card going around the office, the holiday parties might seem inconsequential, but actually the social aspects of building a team are just as important as the professional aspects. One more slide, and we'll get to questions, and that's about representing your organization, which is what communications people do, but it's also what everybody does, really. When you're out in the community, you're representing your organization, you're helping to further or impact that organizational brand. When you're sending an email, when you're meeting people at a reception, when you're posting something on Facebook, it all contributes to how your organization is perceived. And how to do that effectively, I think the one thing I try to do is make everything consistent. So that when people see Flynn, they see the similar colors and fonts and templates, and we have a very consistent look and feel. We have a very consistent style that we follow in all of our written communications, as an example. And also, and especially in what we say. and trying to make sure that we have a party line, if you will, and that I stick to it, that others know it, and that others stick to it as well. We don't want everybody saying a completely different thing about something. So, like I said again, working on messaging and making sure everybody's kind of familiar with the message is very important. Accuracy, obviously, just from a journalistic background, if you're not quite sure about something, be sure to check it out, because that can lead to embarrassment if you're putting something out there that's inaccurate, and ultimately can undermine your credibility. And then the most important thing is integrity. It's just as simple as that. Always take the high road. Don't take the easy way if it means covering something up or admitting to something that you might be embarrassed about. It might help at the point in time, but down the road it can really come back at you. And ultimately, what you've really got is your credibility. That's all you've got. And if anything starts to threaten that, that's somewhere you don't want to go. So just always remember that the most important thing about representing your own organization is integrity, really. So with that, I think we're at the point of questions. Is that right? That's my last slide, so we are at the point of questions.